Well, welcome this morning. My name is Matt DiMatteo. I'm a pastor here at New Life Community Church. Live and serve here for the last 21 years. And today we wanted to kick off our time together with a word of prayer. I think it's fitting coming off of Holy Week. It's a heavy week coming off Holy Week, celebrating and remembering the loss of a son, the Son of God, and then coming through Easter, Resurrection Sunday yesterday as a celebration. But here we are a week later, mourning the loss of a son of Little Village. And so I want us to start out with a word of prayer. So if you join me in prayer. God, we come before you as broken, hurting people in a broken, hurting city, battling epidemic of COVID-19, battling an epidemic of violence, battling an epidemic of racism and white supremacy, battling an epidemic of pain and sorrow and hurt of mothers who've lost their loved ones. And we come before you humbly and asking for wisdom, asking for justice, asking for hope, and asking for healing. We come before you, pray that you lead us and guide us during the time of our this press conference, the time together. Give us the wisdom and understanding and grace to be able to see each other, to be able to walk together, and know that the fact that we are indeed stronger together. So we praise you, we thank you, we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Good morning. I'm going to start out with a walkthrough of some of the facts without any assumption that everyone's heard the facts from start to finish, without interfering with the investigation that COPA is conducting of this deadly force encounter. You've heard me say before, one of my greatest fears as superintendent of the Chicago Police Department has been a deadly encounter between one of our officers and a juvenile. Despite given the recent rise in violent crimes involving juveniles, that fear became a reality on March 29, 2021, with the death of 13-year-old Adam Toledo. At approximately 2:36 a.m., ShotSpotter detected 8 gunshots in the 2300 block of South Sayre in the Little Village neighborhood. ShotSpotter is a gun detection system that operates through a series of sensors to identify potential gunshots. The system, ShotSpotter, alerts officers in real time to the location of gunfire. At approximately 2:37 a.m., 10th District officers received the ShotSpotter notification of shots fired and responded to the alert in less than 1 minute. When officers arrived in the 2300 block of South Sayre, they observed 2 males in a nearby alley. Both males fled. One was armed with a handgun. A foot pursuit ensued, which resulted in a confrontation in the alley. The officer fired his weapon at approximately 2:38 a.m., striking Adam in the chest. A gun was recovered, and Adam Toledo was pronounced deceased at the scene. Why did it take so long for the Chicago Police Department to identify Adam, and what happened between that time and the identification? The answer is this. At the time, Adam had no identification on him. The 21-year-old man who was with him and was arrested for resisting provided a different name from Adam, gave a false, phony name. And we lost considerable time trying to identify Adam because of the wrong name. We fingerprinted the deceased Adam 3 separate times, and there were no matching records in any database. Members of the Chicago Police Department's missing persons desk began combing through missing persons reports from the west side to the far north side in police districts, the 10th District, the 20th District, and the 24th District. We also reached out to nearby suburbs trying to identify Adam. Chicago Police Department detectives were focused on all open cases of people who had not been located but were reported missing. After reviewing numerous reports and unable to identify Adam, detectives began reviewing cases of missing people who had returned home, two separate buckets of information. It was at this time that detectives found a case report matching the description of Adam, who was still unidentified at this time. So let me recount what was in that missing persons report of people recently returned home. So this is not the bucket of information of missing person reports that were open. In other words, people were still missing. This is the bucket of information of missing person reports where people had returned home. A March 26th report was found, and Adam's mother in this report had walked into the 10th District and reported her son missing at 6:58 p.m. His name and description were entered in the missing person system at 7:18 that same day. On March 27th, a detective contacted Ms. Toledo to follow up. At that time, Ms. Toledo told detectives her son had returned home, and his name at that time on the 27th was removed from the hot desk and leads system that collects data on missing persons. So his name was removed on the 27th. On March 31st at 1 p.m., this is 2 days after Adam Toledo's death, and our going back through all the records of missing persons, open and closed cases, detectives at that time contacted Ms. Toledo and told her the description of her son matched an unidentified person in the morgue. Ms. Toledo then told, this is March 31st, then told detectives her son had returned home and then left again, either late on March 27th or early on March 28th, and she had not seen him in several days. Ms. Toledo had not made a second missing persons report, so no report was on file for this second time Adam left home. The mother agreed to meet detectives at the morgue, and at 3:30 p.m. on March 31st, Ms. Toledo identified her son as Adam Toledo, who was deceased at the morgue. As you know, the specifics of this incident include the comprehensive use of force investigation, which includes the use of deadly force, is being conducted by the Civilian Office of Police Accountability with the full cooperation of the Chicago Police Department. The officer involved has been placed on administrative duties for a period of 30 days, which is routine protocol. If, after its investigation, COPA sustains any allegations and seeks a penalty of suspension of more than 1 year or separation of the officer, those recommendations at that time will be forwarded to the superintendent's office, to me. After that, I have 90 days to review COPA's recommendation. If I agree with what COPA has recommended, that recommendation is sent to the city's Department of Law to prepare charges for suspension or separation, which are then filed before the police board. If I disagree at that point with COPA's recommendation, the decision goes before a one-person panel of the police board and for determination and possible referral to the entire police board. It is important that as the department's final decision maker on COPA's recommendation for this investigation, that I remain impartial, and withhold any statement of opinion until presented with the evidence that COPA has gathered. As the COPA investigation continues, CPD will fulfill any Freedom of Information Act requests and produce reports related to this incident, which include arrest reports, any third-party video, and tactical response reports, forms typically filled out by officers after a use of force. Again, COPA has our full cooperation. And finally, our officers must make split-second decisions when it comes to the use of deadly force, and that is a heavy burden. Finally, I want to thank Adam's mother, Ms. Toledo, and their family for their passionate call for peace during this difficult time. This is a tragedy, the most tragic of circumstances. Let's not make it worse by rushing to judgment. I'll pass on the podium to the mayor. Mayor.
Thank you, Superintendent. On this Easter Monday in House of Worship, I am here today to again publicly offer my condolences to the grieving Toledo family who lost their son and brother Adam a week ago. Every loss of life in our city is tragic, and here involving a 13-year-old boy evokes even more pain and sorrow. I also want to say a few things about the response and the path ahead. In the weeks since this child's passing, there have already been hundreds of opinions proffered as fact. Let me say a few words about all of that. First, let us not forget that a mother's child is dead. Siblings are without their brother, and this community is again grieving. None of us have walked in Ms. Toledo's shoes, and none of us will. As a person of faith, I know that there is only one who can judge, and it is none of us. This is a complicated story, but it's not my story to tell, particularly not as our understanding of the facts is evolving. What I do know, and what I will say, is Ms. Toledo and her family need our love and support in this moment, not our withering judgment. Give her the space to breathe, to start to comprehend for herself in her way and at her own speed the magnitude in which her life and that of her families have now forever changed because of events that started before things ended for Adam in an alley at 2:30 a.m. last Monday morning. I'm asking for the media and others to give her that respect and that grace. My words and my plea come from my own experience of having lost a brother to the streets at about the same age of this boy. Families try damn hard and often struggle to protect their own from the dangers of the world. But for some, the street can be every bit as seductive as a narcotic. That was certainly true of my brother, and it took over 40 years, many lengthy jail sentences, addiction, and many other dark times before that boy became a 60-something-year-old man who now struggles every day to keep his life on track. I had the privilege of speaking briefly with Ms. Toledo. I called to offer her my condolences and my help for whatever she needs. She was, as you might expect, overcome with emotion and profoundly grieving. I have spoken to many in this community in the days since this tragic event happened. As a mayor and also as a resident, I am proud of the way that this community has rallied to help this family. That is true because people here are generous of time, spirit, and resources, even when they have little. But also, sadly, because they know, there but for the grace of God go I. This community of Little Village has experienced too much violence and too much heartache. I've had a number of thoughts since I learned of Adam's death a week ago, and it's impossible for me not to view this tragic event through the eyes of a mom. I too have a 13-year-old, and I will acknowledge that I hugged her a little tighter and prayed with an even greater sense of urgency for the Lord to keep her safe, as I prayed for the Lord to welcome Adam home. While the investigations are ongoing, I want to reinforce my respect for the independence of the COPA investigations and the state's attorney's review of this case. I urge both to be thorough but expeditious. The family and the public needs a full accounting. And one issue that is clear is that foot chase was involved. And let me address that briefly. In January of 2018, the Obama administration, the DOJ, flagged foot chases as something that required immediate consideration. And I agreed way back in August of 2019 as a candidate when I commented on a draft of the consent decree that was offered up for public comment. Unfortunately, the final version of the consent decree put this issue off for several years, but it is now past time to act. Tragedies like these also underscore the urgency of reforming CPD's foot pursuit policy, not tomorrow, but now. Foot pursuits present a significant safety issue, officer safety, but also community safety for the pursued and for bystanders. And CPD engages in hundreds of foot pursuits annually and many every single day. Police get a call, they see a potential suspect, their adrenaline is pumping, and oftentimes they get separated from their partner, so they're running on their own through a dense, often dark, urban environment. And to add to that, the person being pursued often has a firearm or is suspected to, and so does the officer. The combination of these elements creates a dangerous environment for all involved. The officer, the person being pursued, and any bystanders. So now, we cannot and will not push the foot pursuit policy reform off for another day. And as Adam's death continues to ripple through our Latinx communities in both Little Village and across our city, we must commit ourselves to the necessary work of creating an environment where all of our residents can live their lives safely. In February of this year, CPD established a set of guidelines for foot pursuits. In early March, the consent decree's Independent Monitoring Team, or IMT, completed an assessment of CPD's data related to foot pursuits and determined that the department should adopt a foot pursuit policy. As mayor, I am directing that a new policy be in place before the summer, and it must reflect the input of focus groups of officers and the community. And the superintendent and I are in full alignment on the urgency of this endeavor. No longer can we afford to put off for tomorrow what we can address today, because lives are truly at stake. In reflecting upon this tragedy, I also know that we cannot let this boy's death pass without other serious considerations and reflections. We have an opportunity and really an obligation to take swift action to get to the bottom of how it was that a 13-year-old boy came to be in possession of a gun. I refuse to just treat this as business as usual. None of us should accept that we have adults here and across Chicago preying upon vulnerable teenage boys. We cannot allow our children's faith to be preordained or relegated to anything less than fulfilling their God-given potential. We have a responsibility to do everything we can to allow these children to grow up surrounded by love and support and opportunity. That's how we lessen the allure of the gang life and how we reduce the opportunity for young people to be led astray. In my time as mayor, we have exponentially increased our investments and outreach to our young people from pre-K through college age. And while we're working round the clock to provide support to our young people through programming that keeps them engaged, focused on achieving their dreams, and most importantly, off the streets, and working to make sure their families have access to social services, economic opportunity, and jobs that pay a living wage. Incidents like these are a reminder that we must work that much harder to keep all of our children safe. We must take this tragedy as a sentinel moment and target all of the factors that allowed it to happen in the first place. Let's be clear. An adult put a gun in a child's hand, a young, impressionable child, and one who should not have been provided with lethal force, a weapon that could and did irreparably change the course of his life. This happens way too often in our city, and it's a way past time for us to say no more. So I have directed the superintendent and the chief of detectives to use every resource to track down the origins of this gun through tracing, fingerprinting, and DNA, and any other means, and to find the person responsible for giving it to Adam. I want to bring that person or persons responsible for putting that gun in Adam's hands to justice. Gangs are preying upon our most vulnerable, corrupting these young minds with promises of familia and lucre. Like good shepherds, we have to better tend to our flocks to keep the wolves at bay. And when the wolves dare try to take one of ours, we must hit them hard with the staff of a community united against the evils that threaten our youth. So we must find those responsible and hold them accountable. Now, I want to end where I began, and that is with a prayer for the Toledo family. We are holding you in our hearts and praying for you during this unfathomable moment. And to all Chicagoans, let us stand united around the Toledo family as they grieve in the entire Little Village community, which has been through so much, especially over the course of this last year. No family or community should ever have to endure the pain of losing a child. Too many young people have been buried in this community. And as your mayor, and as a mother myself, I'm committed to doing everything I can to bring you the answers, to bring justice, and the healing that this family, this community, and this city need and deserve. Thank you. And with that, I'll welcome Alderman George Cardenas to the podium.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Superintendent, for being here. Thanks, Matt. I work with you quite a bit in saving lives in communities like ours. And I do pray. I pray for the family. I pray for Adam. Such a tragedy that shouldn't have happened. Our community is torn. If you go on social media, on discussion blogs, or on Facebook, people are talking about it endlessly. How is it possible that this 13-year-old is at an alley at 2:30 in the morning, instead of preparing to go to be at school or to be in a learning stage? And our community is torn because this is one of many tragedies. I remember about 2 years ago, a young lady that was going to school, was coming home from school, and she got shot through a stray bullet in the 2400 South Rockwell Street, and she dropped dead right there and then. Innocent, she had nothing to do with violence, and life was taken from her, just like this young man. So I joined the mayor, I joined every stakeholder in the city and the state and beyond to really, stop at nothing. We passed 2, 3 stimulus bills from Washington to right the ship, to right our cities, to get back on our feet. But we can't do it without our youth, without the future that's going to be governing or creating something, creating the next company, the next Amazon and the next Facebook. We can't do it without them. And the youth community is part of that future. There's more young people here than any other place in the city. This community is young. It's vibrant. Our core values is church and family. You're standing right here. That's who we are. And so we struggle with this pandemic, epidemic of violence, a gang culture. We got to break through. We got to break through. And we cannot give up. We cannot give up for Adam, for the young lady, or the other young man that also was going to school, was going to be successful, was going to UIC and was shot dead, also on the 23rd block of Rockwell, because he was wrongly at the wrong place at the wrong time. Also late at night, got lost, went through the streets, and they thought it was somebody else. And I can go on and on. No need to name the names, but the pain is there. The pain in our community doesn't go away. And I'll be honest, there's no script here. I live it. I live it with many families that call me, they have their sons are wayward, that there's nothing they can do, they can't control them. And I can't imagine, there's no passing judgment on this family, this mom. But I can only imagine what she went through and what was everything that was in front of her. And maybe that she didn't have the tools and the resources, and maybe the school probably knew something about this young man, or the teachers or the counselor. Somebody in the neighborhood knew something that this young man was going through but couldn't say anything. Because nowadays, in the community, there were neighbors and brothers and sisters. We're too quiet to say anything because we might offend somebody. And I think that's got to stop. It has to stop because it wasn't like that. It wasn't never like that. It was communities and families that helped each other out, that told me if my daughter was, they were seeing something about my daughter that I should be concerned about. This young man had nobody. It's sad to say that this young man, and I've heard rumors, nobody. Nobody that could help him except a gang. Nobody that could claim him as their own except a gang. It's a shame on us. I own that. You wish you could do more. You know, sometimes there's not enough time, enough meetings of getting through or getting to the people that need you the most. It's a sad part about this job. Spend the time in Zoom meetings all day long, trying to solve all kinds of problems. This year's been tough. We could not see eye to eye. We could not see this young man or young women that are really just crying for help. And I'll be honest, it's all on us. The police, if they're seeing a young man that's not acting right, let's stop and ask. Let's stop and help. A bullet's not going to do anything except great death and tragedy. And I pass no judgment on anybody. This should not have happened, period. This young man should not have been there, period. This young man should have been at his house, sleeping, getting ready for his future. And that's on us. And that's what we need to work at. And that's why we're here, because of that. And everybody here is a stakeholder somehow, somewhere. I own it, and everybody should own it. What happens next is going to determine the future of this city, to be honest. There's too much pain, too many torn families. We need to get back to school, get to the basics of caring in our communities among ourselves. Period. I'll leave it with that. Thank you.
I'm going to invite my son Ben actually to come up and stand with me. And this is intentional. Adam Toledo, I want us to say his name and remember him. My name is Matt DiMatteo, and this is my son Ben. As a pastor, leader, father, and neighbor in Little Village, this has been a heavy week. Adam was a 7th grader at Gary Elementary here in Little Village. My son Ben is a 7th grader at Gary Elementary here in Little Village. Adam and his family lived a few blocks from New Life and a few blocks from our house. Adam was our neighbor. Adam was a 13-year-old child. Adam's life was taken 1 week ago today. And in talking to Mom, we lost a future police officer to a police officer. That's heavy. Mom sent me pictures, and there's pictures of Adam in police gear. Adam was our neighbor, and we lost a son, a neighbor, a student, and there are no winners in this situation. At New Life here, we seek to connect youth and young adults to hope, healing, and community through mentoring, education, sports, street outreach, and food distribution. We've been doing it for the last 16 years. And we work with all young people, no matter what, without judgment, and it's with great sadness that we didn't get to wrap around Adam. I feel that we failed this young person. I failed Adam Toledo. We as a city failed Adam Toledo. The Bible says in Romans 12:15, we are to be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. And this week, Elizabeth Toledo, Adam's mother, is weeping and mourning the loss of her son Adam. And as a father and pastor, I weep with her. We as a city should all weep with her. We lost a 13-year-old child. Then in Micah 6:8, the Bible says we are to seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. We are seeking justice in this situation. We want to know exactly what happened the night of this incident, and we want COPA and the CPD to show Adam's mother and the city what led to this horrible outcome. It's what Elizabeth wants. I met her Thursday morning at the scene where her son's life was taken. And we all need to work towards justice so that this will never happen again. All sides, meaning resources, mentors, and supports for young people like Adam, training and accountability for CPD, and supports for our neighborhoods to walk with young people like Adam. We all lost here, and we must do better. We must seek justice and everything that comes with it. Love mercy. There are a lot of people casting stones this week. In a time when our neighborhood and city should be coming together to help this family through this tragedy, we have let them down. The stuff on social media is beyond insensitive and downright hurtful during their time of mourning. We are called to show mercy and compassion, the example of Jesus, especially as we come off of Holy Week. May we show and love mercy to the family during this time. And finally, walk humbly. May we not lead out of our anger and frustration, but out of humility and grace. We need each other. We've spent the last years otherizing each other. We demonize each other. We blame, we attack each other, instead of walking together in love, humility, grace, and forgiveness. The Adams of the world are pushed to the margins, and we cast judgment on them rather than loving them. We should be meeting the Adams at the margins and thus eliminate the margins. We need to realize that we are indeed stronger together and realize there is no us and them, it's only us. And I want to ask us today, as a city of Chicago, who is the Adam in your life? So many people run across our young people in our neighborhoods. They judge them, ignore them, or blame them, but rarely ask how they're doing and what they may need. And it's time to do something. If you want to help, you can reach out to us. There's a movement of people across this city working towards peace in neighborhoods across the city. The Communities Partnering for Peace team is 15 neighborhoods, or 15 agencies in close to 30 neighborhoods, working day in and day out. Street outreach workers loving and walking with the Adams of this world. Well, man, we need more. This is the only way we heal. And Elizabeth, I'm sorry that we as a city failed you and your son. May we continue the work of compassion and action for Adam, for Ben, and the rest of our young people in Chicago. They deserve better now. Tonight we will have a community healing vigil at 4:30 at 24th and Sawyer. We'll be coming together to remember Adam's life. We'll pray together. We'll have a balloon release, but we need to do something different now. Thank you. Please sit down, bud.
Before I take your questions, I just want to lift up appointed father Matt just said, which is we need to all ask ourselves who the Adam is in our life. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Superintendent, have you seen the body camera footage, and if so, when?
Let's get your microphone first, sir. And why don't you identify yourself?
Superintendent Sam Charles, WGN. Have you seen the body camera footage, and if so, when did you see it?
Yes, I have on yesterday.
Was that while you were still in Texas, sir?
No, here,
When did you return to Texas?
Saturday. This to the mayor or to me?
Can you, hold on, let's just get a microphone.
Yeah.
And introduce yourself, please.
Craig Walters, he said. Can you address the police pursuit, the visions, Mayor, that you're looking for, and what, do you have concerns, and how do you balance sending a message to criminals that they can just run if police won't pursue them?
No, that's not at all what we're saying. What I'm saying is foot pursuits pose a significant safety issue. First and foremost to the officers. As I said, and I've talked to a number of officers over the course of this last week, and I know from my own experience, it is one of the most dangerous things that they engage in. They often get separated from their partners. Communication is difficult. You're running through a dense urban environment, an alley, a street, a backyard. So it's way past time that we reckon with this reality that happens literally multiple times every day across many neighborhoods in our city, hundreds of times a year. So the superintendent has already begun the process. There'll be focus groups from officers, focus groups from the community to strike the right balance in looking at best practices from across the country. I've spoken to a number of different mayors over the course of this last week. I think we can stand up a policy that continues to protect our communities, but does it in a way that doesn't put all involved at risk.
And Mayor, have you seen the police body cam
I have
video?
not.
You have not?
I've not
Do you
yet.
intend to?
I will after the mother is able to see them. I think that she should see the entirety of these videos first. I think I owe her that respect. And I want to also make sure that we are continuing to be mindful of the importance of the independence of the COPA investigation. The state's attorney, obviously, as a matter of course, this case was referred to them, but I don't urge both, again, to act thoroughly but expeditiously.
And do you know if this time has been scheduled yet with COPA for the mother to go and see this video?
I'll let COPA address that issue.
Hello, for the superintendent, please.
Can you identify yourself,
Yes,
sir?
Ruben Pereira, correspondent for National Telemundo. Yes, just to have the straight facts, the weapon that was recovered at the scene, the teenage boy was hold this hand, and did he get to get some shots at the police officer?
So this question really speaks to my concern with going further than my statements with interfering with the investigation. There's a balance here on my answering question with my role as superintendent being the final decider on what COPA is going to complete and recommend for discipline. So I'm going to just refer you to my statements that I've made here this morning for that answer, and not go into any further detail, and with understanding that I'm being very careful and cautious with not interfering with COPA's investigation. Thank you.
Dane Placco with Fox 32. There was a report over the weekend that a street gang has threatened retaliation over the shooting. Superintendent, is there anything you can tell us about that?
Again, what I will say is what I ended my statements this morning with on that concern. We're in agreement with the Toledo family in calling for peace, that they would not be representing Adam's death in the most appropriate way if anyone is calling for violence. So I want to answer that question specifically by holding up the family's concern that no one retaliate, no one meets out any type of violence, and that the family is exceptional to be in this place while they're grieving to ensure that no further violence occurs as a result of this incident. Thank you.
Superintendent Patrick Smith from WBEZ. I know that obviously it wasn't until Wednesday that the exact identity and maybe age of the person shot was known. When did you first learn that the person shot in this incident was a young child? What did you do when you found out?
I was when it happened. So on the date and time that it happened, I was awakened and called by our command staff, alerting me that the subject seemed very young, but there wasn't any identification.
And what did you do when you found that out?
We directed, as I mentioned in my statement, let's do everything we can to try to identify, go through missing persons, let's contact neighbors, let's interview witnesses, see if anyone else, and as you recall in my statements, we got a fake name from the person that was with him, so we had not yet fingerprinted Adam and compared it with the name we had, so that delayed the time in identifying him. So our immediate concern wasn't missing persons, it was let's match the name given with the fingerprints to positively identify, which was obviously a rabbit trail. It was really a false name.
And what can you tell us what you see in that body camera footage?
No, I cannot, for the reasons I've told you. Thanks.
All right, let's do a couple more. Who's the question for?
Superintendent, who is the commander of gang investigations right now since James Sanchez was dismissed?
Jason Brown.
Jason Brown?
Yes.
And why was Commander Sanchez, or Civilian Director Sanchez, why was he dismissed from the police department?
We don't comment on personnel actions.
It wasn't related to the party he had on the bar on Archer?
So we don't comment on personnel actions is the answer.
Understood.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Valerie Goodlow, Los Angeles Sentinel. I wanted to ask a question that comes to cameras. How do we get high definition cameras in areas where there's high crime, high shootings? Because it seems that a lot of the people whose children have been shot, they have not caught or apprehended the person that shot or killed them. So how can we get that done? How can we get that camera in that community?
Let's start by saying, as you know, we have a very extensive camera network across the city. We have private cameras that are also tied into the Office of Emergency Management and Communications. We're in the process of upgrading these cameras, which are quite expensive, to have some additional tools like license plate readers, but we're in the process of doing that. But it's a very expensive endeavor, but I agree with you. The better the quality of the cameras, the better we are. Go ahead, and you have a follow-up. Communities are doing that all over the city, man. What I would recommend is that you coordinate with your local alderman. There are a number of aldermen have used their menu money to purchase cameras at a particular intersection when there's a community desire that exceeds what we are doing on a more systematic basis. But that's happening all over the city, and we work with community members on a regular basis to do just that.
I guess one thing we haven't heard from the superintendent, or maybe you can address this, Mayor. How concerned are you about this threat to officers and that it actually is real, and what it could mean if they are firing at what looks like an undercover cop car going down a street in a neighborhood?
Well, your question is loaded with a lot of hypotheticals, which I don't really think is productive for me to address. But look, the reality is that we had an unprecedented number of officers who were shot at last year. I mean, a number which the superintendent can fill in, but 79, which is a number that I can't remember being anywhere close to that number in 20 plus years being involved in and around policing in the city. The danger to officers every day is real. Keep in mind, we just had an off-duty officer targeted less than a month ago. Officers are putting their lives on the line every single day to keep our communities safe. We should understand that and not disregard that, unfortunately, as some do. Look, my hope is that these gang members are foolish enough to do something, but we are actively at work. We'll investigate, and I am determined we will find the person who put this gun in Adam's hand. We will not be deterred by threats from gang members. An adult must be responsible for putting that gun in a child's hand. We have an obligation to his family, to this community, and all over our city to say to gang members and others, we will not tolerate you using our children as pawns and setting them up for a life of misery. That's what's happening in way too many communities, and here's where we must draw the line. Thank you.